those people who had to be, she was one of those hostesses that had to cook everything, So on New Year's Eve, Mom always fixed oysters and oyster stew and ham and fresh bread, the whole works. Well, we had a house full of company, and we were expecting Bill and Lucy. But now, in the meantime, my mother's, one of her young nephews, decided he had to give her something special for Christmas, and he gave her this bottle of wine that had a neck on it, like it was at least a foot long. Well, okay, so Mother decides we got to get rid of that bottle of wine. What are we going to do with it? So Virginia Crane and I started to pour it into a pitcher. Now you all know what happened. And somebody from the living room says, "Here comes Bill and Lucille Slates." Well, they went right to the kitchen where it smelled like a brewery. And they did not say a word. He said, "I'm ready for my oysters." So they sat in the kitchen and ate. And many years after that, Adam, I asked him about that time. I said, "Do you remember that?" "I know." "Why, no, we didn't smell the thing." That's it.
Well, I have some things I'd like to share. First, let the record show, even in his death, the man still knows how to bring people to church. And I'll try to be brief, but I do have a few things I'd like to say. The first is, I think the greatest compliment that I can give this man is simply how proud I am and have always been to be his grandson. From the time I was old enough to understand what was going on around me, I knew Pop was a pretty special guy. Back behind this wall, there's a hallway. And in that hallway is a photograph of every person that served as a minister for this church. And as a young child, I know I've taken many of you into that hallway to point up at that picture and proudly say, "That's my Papa." And I probably did that 100 times. I probably did that to most of you multiple times. But really, even since I was this tall, there's never been a single day in my life where I can't say that I wasn't proud to be his grandson. I have many great memories. He took me fishing, we played wiffle ball in the yard, took me to ball games, come to my own ball games, teach me how to work with wood. I still have his tools. I still use his tools. Hopefully I'll teach my son on his tools. But for some reason, the strongest memories that I have of him are simply when he stood behind this pulpit and did his magic. And magic it was. For me, a Bill Slate sermon was something to come home from college to hear. Because he always brought it. Even in his later years, there were times he couldn't go 5 minutes throughout the day where he would cough, and we would sit at home and say, "He's preaching this Sunday. How on earth is he going to get through it?" And he would. He was a rock star. He always brought it, and when he was done, you felt like $1 million. There's something special when you witness someone doing something that you know they were just simply born to do. And for me, listening to Pop preach, that's what it was. And it made me so proud. When you heard him enough, you kind of begin to learn that he has a little bit of a formula, his secrets to success. And for me, there were 5 elements to every one of his sermons. The first was a stool. God bless this man with many gifts, but the gift of height was not one of them. Number 2 was his ability to tell a good story. There wasn't a Bill Slate sermon without a good story. And boy, could he tell one. His natural style was one that could draw you in, it could engage you, it could make you listen. I mean, stories told so well that I would sit out there and I would focus on him, and his body would be so clear, and everything around him would just go fuzzy. I would just intent focus on his ability to tell a story. Number 3, he always tied something into current events, whether it was something in the news, a movie he had recently seen. He was able to take the stories he was telling about God and he was able to tie it into something relevant of today. Number 4 was to tell a joke. Some sermons had more than others. He had one that I personally named the funny one as a little kid. I asked him to tell it, to go back to that funny sermon all the time. And I recall that one got a reaction more typical of a stand-up comedian that Sunday. But I do not recall any that didn't have at least one moment where everybody spent laughing. Maybe you've already figured out where I'm going with this, but my point is that Bill Slates, the man, followed the same formula as Bill Slate's sermons. He knew how to engage people, how to listen. He knew how to provide relevant, topical advice. Even as he aged and the world was changing dramatically around him, he was always able to keep his perspective current and relevant. I've heard from so many people in the last few weeks that have called or written just to tell me how grateful they were to have him in their life at some critical juncture. He was funny. Funny story, one of the first times my wife was in West Virginia visiting, we all went out to the Char to eat dinner. And for some reason, the waitress that we had, young lady, I think she must have thought he was cute. Because, she treated all of us as a normal table, and for him, everything was sweetie. Sweetie, what can I get you? Would you like a baked potato with that, sweetie? Here's your coffee, sweetie. Your food, sweetie. And it really kind of bugged him. I mean, why does she keep calling me sweetie, And you could just tell it was kind of getting on his nerves, and we're all giggling and tickled because we all kind of figure out what's going on around us. And it just kind of became this inside joke at the table. And so finally, I think on some reflection, he kind of figured out how he was going to respond. And he did it in a way that I never would have expected to hear my pop-up speak to a young lady. It was polite and funny. But she came by towards the end of the evening and she filled up his glass of water and says, "There you go, sweetie." And he smiled and looked at her and said, "Thank you, darling." He was such an affable guy. I bet we could count on one hand, and maybe not at all, the number of negative experiences we all collectively in this room have ever had with Mary. He was always kind to everyone, and when you left his presence, you always felt a little more positive. Which brings me to the 5th component of a Bill Slate sermon, and really ultimately his life with the gift that he was able to provide to us in the end, which was the big finish. He always had a final paragraph. He tied it all together. It was always in a positive way. He left you feeling with hope, joy, confidence, and assurance. He usually delivered it with a smile on his face because he knew he was giving you the good stuff. Now, I know there's no way that I'd be able to do something like that here today and meet his standard. So, in an effort to try to figure out how I was going to finish what I was going to say, I opened up a file we have on our computer called Pop-Pop Sermons. And the very top sermon, it was alphabetical, but the very top sermon was one entitled Mountaintop Experience. The following words of the final paragraph he wrote from his sermon entitled Mountaintop Experience, where he tells the story of Jesus on the mountaintop with Peter, James, and John. In it, he defines a mountaintop experience as one of those moments when all the cares of your world just drifted away and all was good, or when in a time of sadness and trial you felt the presence of God with you in a very real way, providing a sense of peace and confidence. Pop-Pop, I'm going to do my best to deliver this just like you would have. He finished. He said, "This one night I went forward when the invitation was given and I kneeled at the communion rail. It was often called an altar. Someone laid a hand on my shoulder and prayed. I don't know who it was, whether it was our pastor or the visiting evangelist. But something happened that night. I could not tell you what it was, but as we walked down Orchard Street on our way home, I was having my own mountaintop experience. Of course, it didn't last. It never does. But it has always been part of who I am and always will be until that day when I will look upon his face, the one who has saved me by his grace, as he takes me by the hand and leads me to that promised land. What a glorious day that will be. Pray God, may it be so with you." In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
see why Bill liked to sing in this choir. I direct your attention to the United Methodist hymn book on page 881. Let us affirm our faith. Page 881, United Methodist hymn book. When you get there, please join with me. I believe in God the Father Almighty, maker who was conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, dead, and buried. The third day he rose from the dead. He ascended into heaven, and sitteth at the right hand of God the Father Almighty. From thence he shall come to judge the living and the dead. I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and the life everlasting. Amen. At this time, we'll have a video. Into your hands, O merciful Savior, we commend your servant, William. We humbly beseech you, a sheep of your own fold, a lamb of your own flock, a sinner of your own redeeming. Receive him to your arms of mercy, to the blessed rest of everlasting peace, to the glorious company of the saints of light. Amen. Let us recite or let us read the Lord's Prayer from 895. Would you stand, please? Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and power, and glory forever. Let us sing Because He Lives, 364.
Because
name, according to the riches of God's glory, grant you to be strengthened with might through God's Spirit in your inner being, that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, that you, being rooted and grounded in love, may be able to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth and the length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ, which surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled with all the fullness of God. Amen.
Hello, how are you all? Very good.